Hello everybody, my name is Kyoko, and welcome to Bitten. This is a book that I wrote a while ago, and I'm going to be doing an audio of it. Prologue. The front door slammed, jolting Mark out of sleep. Opening his eyes and glancing towards the entryway, he saw his father walk in, dropping his bag by the television and coming up to the ratty two-seater couch. His father put a hand down and touched his forehead, stroking the hair away from his face softly. Mark looked up at him. "You're late," Mark spoke softly, fighting back a smile and replacing it with a frown. His father sighed and nodded. "I know. Work ran late. I'm sorry." He grinned and tousled his son's hair. "Did you miss me? I can get you a babysitter if you want company." In response, Mark groaned and rolled over. "I'm 25, and you're a smartass." His father laughed, then tapped the top of his head. "Yeah, but I'm still bigger than you. Move over." Reluctantly, he sat up and made room on the couch, which his father promptly took over, picking up the remote and flicking on the television. Mark tried to go back to sleep. He had indeed been waiting for his dad to return home. After a while, the TV flicked off and his father rose, scooped him up off the couch, and carried him upstairs. He may have been old, but he still retained his strength, and carried Mark as if he weighed next to nothing. Half asleep, Mark let his dad take him to his room and put him in bed, pulling the dark green covers up over him. Shifting slightly, he snuggled into his pillow and sighed. "I could have walked, you know." His father smirked. "Mm-hmm, I know." He left the room, shutting the door softly behind him. A loud shatter woke Mark once more. The house was still dark, and he stayed in bed, listening intently. Perhaps it was just a dream. Then a thud came from below, and he moaned and rolled out of bed. His father was probably drunk over some stupid shit again. Pulling on his forest green hoodie over his tank top and gray sweatpants, Mark left his room, heading down the staircase to the kitchen. Broken glass was scattered along the tile floor, coming from the sliding glass door leading into their backyard. "Shit," Mark muttered, grabbing his tennis shoes and pulling them on quickly. He looked over the kitchen and saw papers on the counter, covering something. He pulled the papers away and saw guns, surrounded by ammo on the counter. Not a new sight, but strange. Those were usually kept in the living room, not the kitchen. What was going on? Grabbing his .22 just in case, Mark went over to the broken door and stepped through the jagged opening, avoiding any sharp edges. Walking out into the yard, the first thing that caught his eye was the enormous hole in the thin fence surrounding the perimeter. Grumbling with frustration at his father's stupidity, he crossed to examine it. It looked as if something had torn through the metal. Blood, still wet and smelly, coated the wire mesh. Grimacing, Mark stepped back from the fence and shook his head. Must have been a bear. But if that was the case, where was his father? "Dad?" he called out, turning in a circle. "Dad, where are you?" No response. A chill running down his spine, he started back for the house. Just as he reached the door, a low growl resonated through the forest. Mark whipped around, raising his arm, and saw his father, covered in blood, stumbling towards the house. "Dad!" he yelled, hopping over the porch railing. His father stopped moving, and he stopped as well. "Dad, what the hell, man?" he chastised. "You broke the damn door. How are we gonna fix that?" No response. That chill ran down his spine again as his dad continued to stare at the ground, face shrouded in shadows. "Dad?" Mark questioned quietly. The low growl stopped, and his father lifted his head slowly. Mark screamed in terror. The left half of his father's face was completely torn off, exposing the gray bones beneath, coated in half-dried blood. The other side of his face was yellowed, and his eyes were ringed in red and completely white, the pupil gone. His hair hung in ragged clumps before his face, and he stepped forward into the moonlight. His shirt was torn, and his arms and torso were covered in bite marks, some bleeding profusely, others oozing grayish-yellow pus, thick and slimy looking. He wore no shoes, and chunks of broken glass stuck out of his feet, most likely from the door. He gazed at his son with one lifeless eye, and half of his mouth left open slightly, sending a wave of drool and blood down his front. He lurched forward again, backing Mark up into the porch, pausing for a moment. He then opened his mouth further and emitted a bone-chilling shriek. It echoed through the woods, and he lunged for Mark. Dropping the gun, Mark lifted his hands to protect himself from his father. Blood spattered onto his hoodie as he was tackled by the monster of a man, and he held him barely at bay. His father continued shrieking and snapping at Mark as if trying to bite him. Using all of his strength, he shoved his father off, flipped over, and snatched the gun. His father pounced on him, sending them both to the dirt, and dug his teeth into his shoulder, tearing the flesh. Mark screamed again and shot over his shoulder. A spray of blood cascaded over him as the shrieks abruptly stopped and the body on top of him grew limp. Crawling out from underneath his father's dead body, Mark grasped his shoulder with his free hand, the other still clutching the gun, and stared down at the body, still not quite processing what just happened. What was this? It couldn't be his dad. His dad couldn't be a monster. Monsters didn't exist. He turned away from the body, denying the knowledge of it, and stumbling into the house. Slowly walking up the stairs and into a small bathroom, he locked the door behind him. Setting the gun down on the counter, he peeled off his clothes, wincing in pain at the deep gash on his shoulder. The teeth marks were deep into his flesh, and it was bleeding rapidly. He tried to ignore the pain and turned on the shower as hot as it would go. When the water heated, he stepped under the blast and cried out in pain as the steaming liquid hit the bite and dug into his flesh, rinsing out the drool and the thick pus from the monster's mouth. As he scrubbed himself, he ignored the pain and repeated to himself, "I am dreaming. I am dreaming. Lucid dreaming." He hopped out of the shower, not bothering to dry himself, refusing to acknowledge the blood stain in the towel, grabbed the gun, and walked naked to his room, blood running down his back and dripping onto the carpet. He shut the door behind him and locked it, and crossed to his bed, still not acknowledging the blood from his shoulder, which was slowing and clotting, and sending waves of pain sharp as glass through his veins. He set the gun on his nightstand, climbed into bed naked, and shut his eyes, praying that when he opened them, everything would be back to normal. He would be perfectly fine, his dad would be in the kitchen bitching about the coffee quality, and everything would be just the way it was supposed to be. Everything was fine. This was a dream. Right? Thank you so much for watching. This has been the prologue of Bitten, one of my first books. Stay tuned for the next video, Chapter 1. As always, thank you for watching. If you liked it, leave a like and below to let me know. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!